chain of Jamaican DJs or talkover artists who picked up the microphone in the wake of the breakthrough successes of U-Roy and others of the early generation was a youth named Lester Bullock, born June 25th, 1953, Kingston, Jamaica, was raised primarily by his grandmother, his mother having emigrated to the US. He would go on to develop a style heavily influenced by the early pioneers, by U-Roy himself, Sir Lord Comic and others, yet shot through with his own brash, ebullient personality, a quirky sense of humor, and a unique way of stringing together rhymes and lyrics that would take DJing back into the charts in a big way. He had begun following the various sound systems while still in his teens, particularly that of Dennis Al Capone, the El Paso sound system. Al Capone would be a major influence on young Lester to the point where he would eventually style himself as Young Al Capone or Dennis Al Capone Jr. when performing on the microphone. But first, he had to start from the ground level up, helping out with the El Paso sound system as what was called a box boy, doing all the manual labor tasks required to set up a dance for the evening's entertainment, lifting speakers onto trucks, carrying them into the dance location, stringing them up, and waiting for his chance to perform on the microphone, which he finally did get. Young Lester would go on to perform as a DJ in a more prominent role on sounds such as Prince Jackie and Smith the Weapon, and eventually even take over El Paso itself when Dennis Al Capone was away in the UK on business. In the early 1970s, he would begin making the rounds of the local studios, the music producers, trying to get his chance to make records, as many of the other DJs were doing. Nobody really had any interest until he happened upon the man called Lee Scratch Perry, then operating at Dynamic Studios, having not yet built his own Black Ark. Perry heard something in young Lester's delivery, but he didn't like the name Young Al Capone or Dennis Al Capone Jr. He said, "You sound nothing like Al Capone." And in one of Perry's fits of inspiration, he said, "You should be Dillinger." Keeping with the 1930s American gangster theme, Jamaicans loving their gun-toting outlaw figures. From Al Capone to John Dillinger, keeping the tradition intact. Young Dillinger's initial recording session, his very first time in the studio for Lee Perry, would stretch over 2 days. He would record a wealth of material over various Perry rhythms, including Tighten Up and Cloak and Dagger, some of which would surface as singles, some which would remain unreleased. Mid-East Rock would surface on a Justice League 7-inch single, included here on the Give Me Power compilation for Trojan. Other Dillinger material would be Dr. Skank as Young Dillinger, Wham Pam Bidoo, very rare one. Partial Dillinger vocals would also appear on the rare Rhythm Shower LP as Tighten Up, the Tighten Up rhythm track, Rhythm Shower as released and the Trojan Upsetter box set. Also Connection, a couple of Dillinger vocals on the Upsetter Rhythm Shower album. But perhaps the most famous song Dillinger recorded for Lee Perry would be one called Dub Organizer, recorded over the Cloak and Dagger rhythm track, a partial dub of which would appear on the seminal Blackboard Jungle dub, one of the very first dub LPs to appear on the market. Clock Tower Records pressing here. This was a song bigging up King Tubby himself, King Tubby, no miser, King Tubby, the dub organizer, as Dillinger, as he was now styled, had been observing all the producers coming to King Tubby for their dub mixes and thus styled him as the dub organizer. Dillinger would go on to continue working with Perry on an occasional basis right through the Black Ark period. However, he would find greater success elsewhere.
Now, Idrins and daughters, I now present to you episode 3 of Cloak and Dagger. Music to make you stagger. So don't be like Johnny Dollar who swallowed the dollar. Right.
Dillinger's initial sessions for Lee Scratch Perry had opened the door for him as a recording artist, yet even as those songs continued to surface through 1973, appearing either as 7-inch singles or cropping up in one form or another on Lee Perry's LPs of the time, perhaps an alternative mix here or an early dub version there, he would begin the usual round of freelancing for other producers, going into 1974 and 1975 as the producers began to take note of this new DJ on the scene. One of his first stops would be producer Phil Pratt, for whom he recorded Platt Skank, which did well for him, commenting on dreadlocks and various hairstyles. There would be The Big Score and also an energetic toast over Pat Kelly's big hit, Talk About Love, for Phil Pratt. Some of these Phil Pratt sides by Dillinger included on the early Pressure Sounds compilation, Phil Pratt Thing, Big Score right there, and the disco mix of Talk About Love, including the Dillinger Toast. A few years later, when the 12-inch extended mix single or disco mix began to get popular in Jamaica, inspired by the 12-inch singles favored by disco DJs in America. Reportedly, one of the first ones to appear on the Jamaican market would be Pat Kelly's Talk About Love, including the Dillinger Toast, seen here on the Randy's label. Pat Kelly classic hit, Talk About Love, splicing right into Dillinger's toast, First the Girl. For my money, the 12-inch single, kind of an ideal way to hear reggae DJing, to get an idea of the essence of their craft, of starting with a pre-recorded song, adding their lyrics to it, their chat to perhaps comment back to the lyrics, perhaps go off in a completely different tangent, perhaps just add some nonsense words and phrases that don't particularly mean anything but simply sound good, to start from a pre-assigned point, the original recording, and raise the energy level, raise the level of excitement, lacking access to a time machine to go back to a dance hall of the time, hear the DJs as it was all happening. This is perhaps your next best bet. 12-inch extended mix. You can get an idea of the vibes of starting at the original vocal song and then segueing straight into the DJ, and the idea of how a DJ with this strong sense of timing and the right lyrical delivery can really raise the level of excitement.
Talk about love, yeah. Talk about love. Talk about love. Listen. Talk about love. Talk about love.
Just as his mentor Dennis Al Capone had done a few years before, Dillinger would spend a sojourn at Studio One on 13 Brentford Road, Kingston, Jamaica, and like Al Capone before him, his recordings there would result in his debut LP being issued by Studio One. Another classic, essential Studio One DJ LP. Unfortunately, not the easiest to procure on a physical format nowadays, like so many other classic Studio One albums. Just have a digital version myself, so referring here to the cover art of Studio One Records book from Soul Jazz. This would see release in 1975 as Dillinger's debut, Ready Natty Dready. The title track itself, Ready Natty Dready, would only appear on the very first pressing on Winrow Records. Later pressings would swap it out for another song by Dillinger, Natty Kung Fu, riding Roy Richards' Freedom Blues rhythm track and commenting on the then current martial arts craze, a topic Dillinger would carry over into a few subsequent records for other producers. The Freedom Blues rhythm track would also crop up on Killer Manjaro, showing Dillinger's sense of punning at work, twisting around the African mountain, of course, Kilimanjaro as Killer Manjaro. Elsewhere, he would comment on the rise of Rastafari, Natty culture on Natty 10 to 1, writing the original 10 to 1 rhythm track for Studio One. Elsewhere, versioning over the foundation real rock rhythms from Studio One, and Full Up, which he would voice over as Jamaican Collie, praising the local homegrown herb, as the Mighty Diamonds would do several years later on another update of the same Full Up rhythm track, which they would voice as Pass the Coochie, later adapted by Musical Youth as Pass the Dutchie. Dillinger's Ready Natty Dreddy, his debut album, a seminal DJ set from Studio One Records.
Freedom is what the world needs today, baby. Right on.
I hope that I shall live to see, yeah. With every mention now she's free, yeah.
10,000 Babylon don't want to set me free. 20,000 data out there crazy over me. The blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the ways of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful, but is the lightning of the Lord God, the Rastafari. Introducing to you the modern techniques of self-defense called Kung Fu fighting, y'all. Kung Fu fighting, not to kick like lightning, and a Babylon falling, and not to dread on the ball, and not to set up yourself dreadlocks, set up yourself dreadlocks. I just a knot up. I just a dread up. So we check one new figure do what he do. We check 10 sing, making teachers about the thing, call it Kung Fu fighting. Mercy Lord!
In 1975, Dillinger would land at Channel One Studio on Maxfield Avenue in Kingston, arriving just at a fortuitous time as the studio, with its trademark sound that would come to be known as rockers, was poised to seize the reins of reggae music, often using updated rhythm tracks from the past, particularly those from Studio One. Dillinger, having just come from Studio One, very familiar with those rhythm tracks. These rhythms would be given a fresh lick of paint, brighter, brasher, more up-tempo sound, more in step with the mood of the mid-1970s as things became very dread in reggae music, and Dillinger would begin voicing over many of the top hits from Channel One. One of their top-tier acts that put the studio and the rockers sound on the map was harmony group The Mighty Diamonds, with landmark hits like The Right Time and I Need a Roof, seen here on the well-charged imprint of Channel One. Mighty Diamonds classic I Need a Roof. Dillinger would voice that over as Plantation Heights. Again, here on Well Charged, Dillinger with Plantation Heights, chatting over the Mighty Diamonds, I Need a Roof, taking the topic of the original in an even more dread direction, referencing the herb, of course. The strength of Dillinger's material for Channel One would result in Island Records commissioning a full LP from him, which would be released in 1976 as CB200. The title track itself, writing Gregory Isaac's cover of Sun Shines For Me, would cover some of the same territory as Big Youth's earlier motorcycle-themed hit, Ace 90 Skank. The CB200, a popular motorcycle seen on the streets of Kingston, encapsulating some of the rebellious dread energy of the mid-1970s, a major hit for Dillinger, and the album would be a major international success for him, would reach many countries in Europe, finding popularity with university students, the emerging punk audience in the UK, as well as the title track. Dillinger's No Chuck It would include one of his electrifying opening lines he was capable of tossing out at his most inspired, with its opening couplet of Jamaica, land of wood and water, now become motor vehicle and manslaughter. However, it would be a very atypical hit for Dillinger that would really push his success over the top, would hit dance floors as far afield as London and the discotheques of New York. He himself would say he had based it on a phrase he heard from partying white Western hippies that he's encountered on the north coast of Jamaica as they were partying one night, and said they had cocaine running around in their brain. It also bears a lyrical similarity to an early blues song by Reverend Gary Davis. The song Cocaine in My Brain would have a very American style rap from Dillinger, as he does a faux dialogue between two American accented men, Jim and John, covering some of the seedy nightlife of New York City, the drug culture of the times, and the rhythm would be somewhat inspired by People's Choice's Philly soul early disco hit, Do It Any Way You Wanna, Gamble Huff production, major hit for Dillinger that would reportedly hit #1 on the charts in the Netherlands, do well in Germany and many other countries. Major hit for a time. Dillinger would be the #1 reggae DJ in the world on the basis of this album, the most pivotal one of his career. Elsewhere, Race Day would cover a day at the horse track, the famous horse track in Jamaica, Caymanas Park, while Natty Kick Like Lightning would reprise the martial arts theme of his earlier tune for Studio One, Natty Kung Fu. Buckingham Palace would cover some of the same ground as U-Roy's Chalice in the Palace, with Dillinger smoking up the herb inside Buckingham Palace and burning down the Vatican and the institutions of Babylon, while Crankface featured a accompanying vocal by up-and-coming DJ Trinity. Him and Dillinger, very close friends, would move very closely for some time. The CB200 album, this is my well-loved US pressing on Mango Records, which of course will not come out. Mango, Dillinger with CB200.
Heal Diamonds. It's Dillinger. You want to see where Diamond stand up with a channel and studio in a star. And I'm on size 200 on a CB200. Dolly on a Z star. Great sound God. CB200. I'm not rich, but the sun shines to me. Mercy, Lord, Lord have mercy. Hold me tight, y'all. Say 100, 200. Sat up on a CB200. I say 200. You better show me your natty dread. Jamaica, the land of wood and water.
Bad man come.
Now becomes motor vehicle and manslaughter. So why John Data don't be like John Slaughter, yeah. Yeah. The bada chuck it on the hygiene them. Say you know fi chuck it on the brethren them. You know fi chuck it on the data them. You must live in love and unity. Yeah. You see, I'm the dynamite. So all you got to do is hold me tight because I'm out of sight, you know? Because I'm a dynamite. Whenever time I walk in the rain, man, oh man, I feel a pain. I feel a burning pain, keep on burning in my bloody brain. I've got cocaine running around my brain. I've got cocaine running around my brain.
With the international success of the CB200 album, Dillinger was catapulted into the front ranks of reggae DJs, Island Records swiftly commissioning a follow-up LP, which was released also in 1976 as Bionic Dread, sporting an eye-catching cover by artist Tony Wright, also here on the Mango label. Despite strong material from Dillinger, including the title track itself, positioning himself as something of a dread answer to TV's $6 Million Man, the Bionic Man, yet here powered not by robotic parts, but by a combination of strong ganja and ital juice, and thus capable of superhuman feats, as well as Rrrrrragnampiza with its trilled R's, yet another on-record alternative persona for Dillinger. Yet, despite strong material, the album would not perform quite as well as CB200. Nonetheless, Dillinger was now entering his prime with a flood of material hitting the market. He would begin some select self-productions, as well as his chart-topping recordings for Channel 1. Some select sides would appear for other producers. He had done some sides for Augustus Pablo. His Brace as a Boy would appear later on the original Rockers compilation, seen here on Augustus Pablo's Message label. Brace a Boy, Dillinger Toast for Augustus Pablo. For producer 90 the Observer, he would record Flatfoot Hustling, one with another arresting opening line, one of his best. Flatfoot Hustling for 90 the Observer, included on the 90 compilation of DJ sides. Microphone Attack for Blood and Fire Records. Dillinger with Flatfoot Hustling, one of his best tunes. For the Abyssinians vocal group, he would voice over their immortal Sata Masagana rhythm as I Saw Esau, biblical chat with his sense of rhyming wordplay in place. I Saw Esau by Dillinger, included also on a Blood and Fire compilation, Tree of Sata. And to complete a Blood and Fire trilogy, Dillinger would voice a couple of monumental sides for producer Vivian Jackson, Yabby You, first freshly over the heavyweight Jah Vengeance rhythm and commenting on the Ital Rastafarian diet derived from biblical verse, and also teaming up again with his spar Trinity to jointly voice Jesus Dread, the nickname of Yabby You, immortalized on record by Trinity in combination with Dillinger, to staggering DJ sides for Vivian Jackson.
My father's name was Elijah, and my name is Rrrrrragnampiza. My name is Rrrrrragnampiza, and I don't eat fertilizer. I am the dub organizer, and I come to make you wiser, and you got to realize that Rrrrrragnampiza setting at the trade and no miser, 'cause him a dub organizer and him a dub advisor. Say my daddy was a great old man, and so he died with a shovel in his hand. And hustle ability is what I've got. Yeah. No gonna down the line until you that you come on down. Ah, baby. Till you that you come on down the son of I would say. Till you bought the son, I keep you rocking, you know. Say me mother born as a Cuban hustler. Say me papa born as a Cuban scuffler. But here Jerome, not tough. Still I'm an Ital Rasta. Right now, yeah, hear me? This is 76 and I'm on West Street. I'm strictly freshly I am. Freshly? Dread. I'm Rasta. That's cool. A man shall not live by bread alone. but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of Jah. Jehovah, Jehovah, yeah. Come it's a party days and party nights, and not the dread in the wilderness. Till you that party days and party nights, and not the dread in the wilderness. Me say him far from the kitchen and him don't yam chicken. The dread side something and him don't eat mutton. The dread side the rake and him don't yam steak. So him step on the brake. Yeah.
While maintaining a steady pace of recordings in Jamaica, Dillinger would begin spending a lot of time in the UK to capitalize on his popularity there. He would be name-checked in the Clash's song White Man in Hammersmith Palace with the opening lines of Midnight to Six Man for the first time from Jamaica, Dillinger and Leroy Smart. And split LP with him and his great friend Trinity would appear in the UK, recorded partly between Jamaica and there. Unclear if they recorded their parts together or separately, but it would be released around 1977 on the Burning Sounds label as Clash, Dillinger versus Trinity. These kind of faux Clash albums, quite popular at the time. Burning Sounds label. This is a reissue from a couple of years ago, 2015. Burning Sounds label, produced by UK producer Clem Boucher, finds them name-checking another UK sound man and producer, Count Shelley, on Shelley with the Electric Belly, and paying tribute to the TV cop show in their own inimitably wacky fashion on Starsky and Hutch. Step It Brother Clem, name-checking the producer himself. This would also be released in France under the alternative title of Jamaican Dollars, just credited to Dillinger, but it's the exact same album as that Clash one with Trinity, here on the Celluloid label out of France. 1977 would see the Superstar album released in Jamaica of Dillinger recordings with Bunny Lee, Uber producer Bunny Lee. The Superstar album would mainly feature Dillinger rapping or chatting in cultural fashion over Johnny Clark hits for Bunny Lee. My copy has no cover, but appeared there on the Weed Beat label, 1977, with Side 1, Dillinger vocals, Side 2, dubs to the accompanying tracks. That would appear in a couple of different forms, would be released in Canada as non-stop disco style with a different cover, and the tracks sequenced differently, so the dubs follow the vocals. 1978 would see the Cornbread album appear, do well as well. This is a German pressing actually on Bellaphon, showing Dillinger's continued international success. Quite cultural mode here. Thank You Jah, Dread Called Fred, Repatriation Time, Dread a Warrior. The title track itself, a very conscious and radical side of Dillinger as he continued to crank out a high volume of material, yet the fashions were beginning to change in Jamaica. Dillinger would attempt to reprise his earlier success with Cocaine in My Brain with a further song called Marijuana in My Brain, maybe more acceptable to the Rastas. Nonetheless, he would continue recording right through the 1980s quite regularly, with the Join the Queue album appearing in the early 1980s, backed by the Roots Radics and We the People Band. This is a reissue from the King Spinna label, originally came on the Oak Sound label. Strong album from Dillinger, early 80s style. He would also have a massive song in the early 80s with the Posse outing of Five-Man Army, leading off a heavyweight assemblage of talent backed up by Trinity, Wayne Wade, Al Campbell, and Junior Tamblyn. This is a Record Store Day reissue from a few years back. Massive tune with Dillinger heading an all-star group. Babylon don't stand a chance against that lineup, that heavyweight a rhythm. Dillinger's career would enjoy a resurgence in the 1990s, became very involved with the Blood and Fire reissue label, would tour the world performing on their sound system, bringing DJing back to a new audience in its original form of the live sound system performances, the environment he had started in from the ground level all those years before, and he remains active to this day. This has been my look at Dillinger. Thank you for watching, everybody. Cheers.